Raccoon City was built on secrets. Secrets its residents would never truly know until it was too late. Most people went to sleep in a city that would never wake up the same. To the rest of the world, Raccoon City would become a warning. A reminder of how far powerful corporations can go and how little human life means once profit and control are at stake. From the moment the TVirus escaped, the city was already doomed. But the outbreak didn't begin in a single place, or in a single moment. It leaked in multiple places, in the Arklay mountains where Umbrella was hiding its research facilities, and beneath Raccoon City itself, in the underground Nest laboratory. Two separate locations, one shared disaster. For the people inside it, the end came quietly, at first. By the time they understood what was happening, Raccoon City no longer belonged to them. So how did these incidents connect? How did they lead to the complete destruction of Raccoon City? How did the TVirus actually escape? And how did it evolve from Crimson Heads to Lickers to what it was originally meant to create, the Tyrant project? Because the Tyrants were never the end of the story, they were only the beginning. And when Umbrella finally fell, the real question wasn't what they destroyed, but what they left behind. What most people associate with the TVirus was never its original purpose. The outbreaks, the monsters, the destruction, all of it was the result of something that had gone completely out of control. Umbrella itself was founded as part of a eugenics project, an attempt to guide human evolution using the rare progenitor virus that Oswald E. Spencer had discovered in Africa. But this research required enormous funding, and in order to sustain it, Umbrella turned to darker solutions. The company began developing and selling biological weapons derived from the progenitor virus. Through this process, a weaker artificial strain was created, the Tyrant virus, better known as the TVirus. Its goal was simple, to create superhuman soldiers, faster, stronger, and more resilient. But the virus was unstable. In nearly all cases, the human body rejected it, leaving only a microscopic percentage of subjects capable of surviving the process. Because of this, Umbrella's experiments demanded absolute secrecy. Human and animal trials could never be conducted in public view. Entire research divisions had to be hidden from governments, civilians, and even most of Umbrella's own employees. And so, Umbrella turned to one of the most isolated regions near Raccoon City, the wilderness of the Arklay Mountains. The Arklay Mountains were a vast, heavily forested region marked by steep terrain, constant fog, and limited civilian access. Even before 1998, the area carried an uneasy reputation. Travelers vanished without explanation. Accidents occurred in places no one should have been. Locals spoke of the mountains as if something about them was fundamentally wrong, as if the forest itself rejected those who entered it. These stories were never taken seriously, but they lingered quietly in the background, long before any official outbreak would ever be recorded. For Umbrella, however, the Arklay Mountains were ideal. The region's isolation, natural cover, and lack of oversight made it the perfect location to conceal large-scale research operations. Beneath the forest, Umbrella constructed a network of underground facilities, officially registered as pharmaceutical and vaccine research centers. In reality, these installations were dedicated almost entirely to viral bioweapons development, BOW experimentation, and combat performance testing of infected organisms. At the center of this network was the facility hidden beneath the Spencer Mansion, a massive estate built specifically to hide the lab under it. This installation served as a primary TVirus research hub, where scientists conducted experiments on human subjects, animals, and viral strains under extreme secrecy. Adjacent training complexes allowed Umbrella to observe how infected organisms performed in controlled and semi-controlled environments, collecting data on mutation, aggression, and survivability. The Arklay facilities were not isolated projects. They were part of Umbrella's larger global network, designed to refine viral weaponization, erase failed experiments, and ensure that nothing that happened in the mountains could ever be traced back to the company itself. Protected by geography, corporate influence, and armed security, the Arklay Mountains became one of Umbrella's most important and most dangerous research sites. For a long time, it worked. The Arklay facilities remained hidden. Beginning in the late 1960s, Umbrella spent over 30 years conducting viral experiments in complete secrecy. But there's a difference between illusion and control. Umbrella believed it controlled the virus. In reality, it only delayed the consequences. And what destroyed everything wasn't a failed experiment, it was a failed judgment. Umbrella was not founded by Oswald E. Spencer alone. He created the company alongside two other people, Edward Ashford and James Marcus. But Spencer never saw them as partners. To him, they were stepping stones. Once their research was complete, Spencer ensured they were removed, and their work was absorbed into Umbrella's core projects. In Marcus's case, however, the plan didn't end the way Spencer expected. Marcus had been experimenting with the TVirus using leeches as biological carriers. When Umbrella Security Service agents arrived to eliminate him, his research was seized and reassigned to two rising figures within Umbrella, William Birkin and Albert Wesker. Birkin was a prodigy, willing to cross any ethical line for scientific advancement. Wesker was something far more dangerous, a man already playing multiple sides. Marcus's body was disposed of, but his work was not finished. The leeches infected with his virus fed on his remains. Over the next decade, they absorbed his genetic structure, his neural patterns, and his memories. They reconstructed him, not as a human, but as something that believed it was still James Marcus. Umbrella never realized what they had left behind. This was Spencer's true mistake. Not the murder, but the assumption that nothing could return. In 1998, the creature known as the Queen Leech, something that believed it was James Marcus, began its revenge. It released the TVirus across Umbrella's connected Arklay research network, not in a single laboratory, but throughout multiple facilities, tunnels, and transport systems at once. Storage units were compromised, ventilation systems became transmission routes, surfaces, equipment, and personnel were contaminated within hours. As the outbreak spread, a secondary disaster occurred. An experimental strain, later designated Epsilon, lost containment during this chaos. Developed as an improvement over earlier Tyrant project strains, Epsilon was designed to increase the chances of successful human mutation while reducing brain damage. During Umbrella's Tyrant development program, an airborne form of the virus accidentally escaped into the facility, an incident partially triggered by the Queen Leech's interference. Protective suits failed, and researchers attempting to secure the area were exposed almost immediately, causing the infection to grow exponentially. The Arklay complex didn't collapse from one mistake, it collapsed from everything failing at once. As the virus spread and the staff started turning into zombies, they realized one infected researcher was reacting very differently to the TVirus. After reanimation, his body underwent a second violent transformation. His skin deteriorated, blood vessels became exposed, and his muscle mass increased unnaturally. With very less data on human exposure to the TVirus, he was kept for further study, but he soon proved to be too dangerous. 4 workers were killed when an attempt to feed him went wrong. As a precaution, he was placed into storage and sealed inside a coffin in the Spencer Mansion cemetery. This researcher had been infected with the Epsilon strain, becoming the first documented Crimson Head, Prototype 1. Unlike normal zombies, Crimson Heads were faster, stronger, and far more aggressive, proving that the virus was no longer just killing, it was evolving. And he wasn't the only one. Multiple infected bodies throughout the facility now carried the same strain, some dormant and some already active. No one could tell who would mutate next, or whose corpse would rise again as something worse. Researchers initially tried to continue their work as if the situation could still be controlled, but journals and letters later recovered described the psychological collapse of the facility. Colleagues lost speech, coordination, and identity. Some recorded hearing footsteps in empty corridors, others described hunger that felt unnatural. The workers no longer feared death. They feared what they would become, and some chose to end their lives before the virus could decide for them. By late May, researchers were either dead, reanimated, or hiding in sealed rooms with limited supplies. Albert Wesker cut all communications and ordered armed guards to shoot anyone trying to escape, hoping to prevent any information from leaving the mansion. Instead of evacuation, the remaining researchers were instructed to continue collecting data on the outbreak. For a brief time, Umbrella still believed the situation could be studied, until that day finally came. On May 21, a caretaker infected by the virus lost control and murdered a fellow staff member inside the mansion, just above the underground labs. Entire wings of the mansion went silent. From that moment forward, the facility went from being a laboratory to a feeding ground. Months passed, and the infection finished what it had started. Inside the underground facilities and the Spencer mansion, there were no longer signs of life, and the Arklay facilities could now be considered virtually abandoned. Corpses wandered the halls endlessly for weeks and months, their bodies artificially animated by the TVirus, driven by nothing but the instinct to feed. But humans were never Umbrella's only test subjects. The TVirus had been used on animals and plants as well, some deliberately, others infected by accident. And among those animals were dogs, which managed to escape the mansion grounds and fled into the Arklay forest. Once in the forest, they began attacking hikers and campers. The virus spread very quickly, from animals to civilians, and from civilians to more victims. Weeks later, bizarre murders began to surface. The first confirmed civilian victim was a young woman, whose body washed up downstream near Raccoon City. Authorities blamed a wild bear, but the deaths didn't stop there. Families camping in the woods were found torn apart and partially eaten. Lone hikers vanished without a trace. Some victims showed human bite marks. Others appeared to have been eaten alive. The press soon labeled them the Arklay Mountain Murders. The Raccoon City Police Department struggled to explain the killings. Early theories included a rogue bear, a cannibal cult, even a satanic ritual group. These ideas existed because the wounds made no sense. They were too human to be animal and too savage to be human. Survivors described their attackers only as monsters or vicious dogs. No clear explanation ever emerged. The forest became a place people no longer entered. What had once been wilderness was now treated like cursed ground. Eventually, officials abandoned the bear theory and publicly admitted that a group of deranged dogs might be responsible. By 9th of July, all roads into the Arklay Mountains were closed and civilians were warned to stay away entirely. Media pressure intensified as public fear spread and the police had no answers. This was no longer a case for ordinary officers. So the Raccoon City Police Department deployed its elite unit, the Special Tactics and Rescue Service, S.T.A.R.S. But despite all their training, nothing had prepared them for what waited in the Arklay Mountains. For Umbrella, this was only a reputation and containment problem. For S.T.A.R.S, it would become an unexplainable nightmare. The S.T.A.R.S operation was doomed from the start. Not because the team lacked skill or they underestimated the threat, but because the mission itself had been designed to fail. Bravo team was deployed first to investigate the origins of the Arklay Mountain murders. Officially, their task was simple: locate the source of the killings, identify the threat, and report back. But halfway through the flight, their helicopter suffered a sudden mechanical failure and crash-landed deep inside the forest, with no extraction, no communications, and no idea that the crash itself had been engineered. The Arklay forest already carried a dark reputation, and S.T.A.R.S was about to learn why. They began searching the area on foot, with no idea what to expect or what was waiting for them in the forest. By the time Alpha Team would later arrive, most of Bravo Team would already be dead. The helicopter failure was not an accident. Albert Wesker had sabotaged it. As S.T.A.R.S captain, Wesker knew Bravo Team would be sent first. He also knew Alpha Team would be deployed to find them, and he had already decided how both teams would be used. Wesker was no longer loyal to Umbrella, only to his own future. His objectives were calculated. First, retrieve Umbrella's research data from the Arklay facilities. Second, test Umbrella's bioorganic weapons against a fully trained tactical unit, to determine whether human soldiers had already become obsolete. Wesker didn't see S.T.A.R.S as partners, he saw them as live combat data. While searching the forest, Bravo Team discovered Umbrella's Ecliptic Express, a transport train used to move staff, prisoners, and experimental cargo between Umbrella's connected Arklay facilities. The train was silent, dark, and already overrun. Inside, they found corpses, blood trails, and signs of violent struggle. The T-Virus had already spread through the train, carried by James Marcus's Queen Leech and its infected organisms. Bravo team soon realized that it wasn't a local outbreak. It felt more and more industrial in nature. Following the train's route, they traced the infection back towards Umbrella's infrastructure, leading directly to the Arklay training facility. With Bravo team missing, Alpha team was deployed under Wesker's command. They located the wrecked helicopter, confirming Bravo's crash. But before they could even search the area properly, the escaped T-Virus infected dogs attacked from the forest. One of the team members, Joseph Frost, was killed almost immediately. Their helicopter pilot Brad Vickers panicked and fled, leaving the rest behind. Now stranded, surrounded, and outnumbered, Alpha team had only one option: follow Wesker. And Wesker led them exactly where he wanted, to the Spencer Mansion. The Spencer Mansion itself was not an ordinary estate. It had been designed by a specialist architect under Umbrella's orders. Its purpose was more than just luxury. It was secretly built for defense. The building was constructed to confuse, delay, and trap intruders through puzzles, hidden passages, sealed mechanisms, and false routes. Its true role was to protect the underground laboratory concealed beneath it. To S.T.A.R.S, it was a maze, and now they were trapped because going back out was a death sentence. Inside, Alpha team encountered walking corpses, broken laboratories, blood-soaked corridors, and creatures that shouldn't exist. They were no longer investigators, and Wesker was watching. What followed was a survival experiment. Whatever was left of S.T.A.R.S didn't completely disappear inside the mansion. They adapted. Using their training, instincts, and teamwork, the surviving members of Alpha team pushed forward. They encountered the bodies of Umbrella's staff, scientists, guards, and technicians, now reanimated into zombies. Some moved slowly, barely holding together. Others mutated into Crimson Heads when the Epsilon strain detected critical damage. But the dead were only part of the nightmare. S.T.A.R.S fought giant spiders, infected reptiles, mutated sharks, and even plant organisms that had grown beyond any natural design. Umbrella's experiments were no longer contained. They were roaming freely. Every room told a story. Every corpse was evidence. While Alpha team fought through the Spencer Mansion, what remained of Bravo team was struggling to survive inside the Arklay training facility. The building was just as overrun. Leeches filled corridors, infected staff wandered endlessly, and James Marcus's presence still lingered through the Queen Leech's influence. Rebecca Chambers, one of the only surviving members of Bravo team, with the help of Billy Cohen, a former Marine convicted of murder and being transported through the Arklay Mountains at the time, slowly pieced together the truth that the outbreak was not supernatural, not accidental, and not isolated. It was man-made. Umbrella had created it, and now Umbrella was trying to erase it. As Alpha team descended deeper into the mansion, they uncovered the underground laboratory beneath it, and with it, the full scope of Umbrella's work. Bioweapons, human experimentation, viral mutation programs, the Tyrant project. One of the central objectives of the Arklay training facilities, and the reason everything else existed. They quickly caught on that Albert Wesker had been working against them, stealing Umbrella's research while playing every side. To eliminate all witnesses, Wesker released Umbrella's ultimate bioweapon, the Tyrant T-002, but the creature was unfinished, unstable, and uncontrollable. It impaled him through the chest, leaving him for dead, and then it turned towards S.T.A.R.S. There was no strategy left to follow, only the question of whether anyone would make it out alive. The Tyrant couldn't be killed with just skill alone, so they had to use overwhelming firepower to finally put it down. With the Tyrant destroyed and Wesker presumed dead, the surviving members of S.T.A.R.S activated the laboratory's self-destruct system, not just to destroy Umbrella's work, but to make sure it didn't spread any further. Brad Vickers returned, overcoming his fear, and pulled them out of the nightmare. Behind them, the Spencer Mansion and its underground lab were completely destroyed in the explosion, and Umbrella's Arklay operations were gone. Most of S.T.A.R.S never made it out, but those who survived were now more dangerous to Umbrella than any failed experiment. They carried the truth, they carried evidence, They carried witnesses, and Umbrella knew plans were already in motion to silence them. But they were already too late, because the virus had not stayed in the mountains. It had now reached Raccoon City.